Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the Supply Chain Management Risk Management Consortium's fourth in the series of webinars on supply chain management readiness assessment. Today's webinar will focus on our fourth offering, the Tailored Supply Chain Improvement Acceleration Playbook. We appreciate you taking your time today to attend today's webinar on building an evolving, resilient enterprise. We hope that you and your family are healthy and safe. Again, this is the fourth webinar in the series, and we have one more webinar coming up on the 22nd of September. We look forward to an interactive webinar consisting of audience polling questions that we just showed. Please have your cell phone or your have another window open on your computer and on your browser and respond to the poll everywhere. Also, please do use the chat or Q&A box and ask questions throughout the webinar. My name is Jim DeVries. I'm a founder and president of Enhance International Group and a partner of the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium. I will be today's host for today's webinar, and we have with us, joining us is Connor from Uphaven Management, South Africa. So we will be again, please do use the chat box and ask questions. Featured with me today is Greg Schlegel, and he'll be sharing his deep expertise as the original founders of Supply Chain Risk and Resiliency and former president of Apex. Greg founded the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium in 2010. He's a celebrated speaker and esteemed author of the book, Supply Chain Risk Management in Emerging Discipline, published in 2015. Greg, a few words of introduction.
Hey, Jim, thanks a lot. Pleasure to be here, folks. Glad you could join us, talk about our passion. As Jim mentioned, I'm the founder of the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium. We've been in business over 12 years. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. I've taught supply chain risk management at Lehigh University for 10 years. I still teach ERM, Enterprise Risk Management, at Villanova University here in the States. I spent 8 years as an IBM supply chain executive consultant and a practice lead. I spent 30 years, maybe like many of you, as a supply chain practitioner for several Fortune 100 manufacturers. I've taught SCM, supply chain management, at 6 different US universities. And as Jim mentioned, I was president of Apex, now ASCM, back in the late 90s. So pleasure to be here and look forward to a robust dialogue. Jim.
Back to you, Greg, on your overview, please.
You bet. We said we'd talk a little bit about the consortium, a quick thumbnail sketch, a quick profile of who we are and what we do. On the right-hand side, we got 31 companies. That's 1,500 supply chain risk professionals around the globe. They bring tools, techniques, methodologies, and computer solutions to help us identify, assess, mitigate, and manage supply chain and supply chain risks. On the left-hand side, what do we provide? We basically focus on 5 areas. We have online education. We got 2 MBA-type courses culminating in a certificate. We do coaching and consulting in this space, both SCM and supply chain risk. We bring enterprise software as a solution products, especially for visibility in risk management. And we have 2 online assessment tools. One is supply chain management readiness assessment, which we're going to talk in detail about today. And the final one is a prescriptive online supply chain risk and resiliency 90-day action plan using AI and ML algorithms. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jim.
Thanks, Greg. Just a little background on Enhance International Group, EIG. We're an exchange of passionate experts to guide your transformation and provide self-generating and self-funding results. We have vetted over 50 consultants, consulting companies, and SaaS providers through thought leadership to enable your enterprise. EIG serves as a master integrator to provide you the access to the best and brightest companies. We're like a Swiss Army knife, we're often called. Our team is dedicated to empowering your organization's workforce by leveraging EIG partners' tenured thought leadership and expertise. Our goal is to exceed your expectations and with customized, predictable, sustainable, repeatable, 90-day self-funding programs. In describing the supply chain management, we look at this bicycle slide we like to use, and we start to recognize, supply chain is actually an ecosystem. You may have heard the saying that we are only as strong as our weakest link. We take this further in following the bicycle analogy. The dry pedal wheel represents the strategy of your company, how to get there, and the execution wheel being represented by the rear wheel. Our strong drive on the wheel pedal, one strong drive, results in many rotation cycles and positive execution, as long as you are pointed in the right direction, of course. And therefore, the drive chain represents the tactics that keep up the momentum so that we can get to where we're going to in the fastest and shortest amount of time. The strong link strategy to execution ecosystem creates positive momentum for the company, its employees, customers, suppliers, and stockholders. Quoting Einstein, life is like a bicycle. To keep your balance, you got to keep on moving. So in summary, there are three things you want to consider from a supply chain. And one is, are you making a decision-making between strategic, tactical, and operational horizons? If not, your company will be unbalanced and become derailed. Number two, linking strategy through execution will build your cadence. The better your cadence, the better your productivity and profitability, and of course, scalability. A solid strategy should result in many execution cycles, resulting in that momentum and cadence that you built. So let's get started. So this is, again, the fourth webinar in the series of webinars we've already gone through over these past few months. We have one more webinar coming up. And again, today's webinar focuses on our Tier 4 offering, Improvement Acceleration Playbook, that's customized for your company. Our fifth webinar will be a fireside chat and launching the supply chain readiness tools. And in that, we want to be even more interactive. So we look forward to that in mid-September. Our agenda today starts off with the compelling reasons to focus on supply chain readiness, looking at the latest from what's happening in the market today. Our second area is Tier 4 Supply Chain Improvement Acceleration Playbook, a little bit about it, and then a recap of the Tiers 1 through 3 deliverables, and then we'll talk about the output of all the different tiers and how it relates to the Tier 4 playbook and culminates into that playbook. And our fifth area will be accelerating that time to value and producing your bottom line ROIs. So let's get started, Greg.
Thanks, Jim. Am I coming through okay?
Yep.
Okay, good. Just checking. We thought we'd start you off with some compelling reasons to focus on supply chain readiness. So with that, let's take a look at some of these compelling reasons. First, we'd like to start with building a resilient enterprise. And this comes from our book. Book's doing pretty well. It's been out there for about 6 years now, getting a little long in the tooth, but we put together some definitions for the reader. And the one definition we like the best relative to what a resilient enterprise looks like is this. A resilient enterprise has the capacity to overcome disruptions and continually transform itself, meet the changing needs and expectations of what? Its customers, shareholders, and other stakeholders. To be honest with you, folks, that's a pretty tall order. That's one in terms of compelling reasons. There's more. Our next compelling reason is essentially a Gartner LinkedIn. This is fairly recent. And on the left-hand side, Gartner went globally and asked the question, which of the following has unprecedented challenges for supply chains in 22? On the right-hand side, no surprise, the two biggies, the ongoing pandemic, and again, surprise to all of us who are practitioners, global shortages across all sectors. Again, at the moment, no sector has been immune to the pandemic, and all the other bullwhip effects are still in progress relative to multiple industry sectors. So again, no surprise. We have a few more. This is from friends of the consortium called the Conference Board up on the top right. They're US-based consultancy. They share a lot of data with us. This is their profile of the global economic outlook for 2022 and beyond. They more or less talk about it top down, left to right, back on after a recession or possibly just a stagnation. We're not sure exactly. That what they do, again, left to right, top down, is they talk about what actually has happened in 2020. In the middle of the top area, you can see their forecast for 21-22, continued recovery and expansion. It's just a matter of the rate. And then 2022 to 2031, they talk about moderate growth. And then you can take a look in the middle. They go through the major regions of the globe and give you a sense of the share of the global economy, the annual GDP number, an average annual GDP growth, and average annual GDP as well. So you can take a look at it. You may or may not agree and or believe, but it looks like they're talking about a stagnation to a certain extent, and then some, at least some growth going forward across all the regions. And then they talk about the drivers of growth, and they are labor, investment, and productivity. So we wanted to share that outside-in picture of what it looks like going forward beyond 2022 with you. And then we have a few more compelling reasons to act. Next is M&A, merger and acquisitions. These are M&A trends since 2004. The blue bars are total deal values in US billions of dollars. And the lines, the dark lines, are total volume of activity. You can take a look at the net on the bottom, folks, is with the pandemic over the last 2.5 years. You can see there's been a sharp increase in mergers and acquisitions. And the reason we share this with you is during times of crises and stress to our supply chain, sustaining a business is extremely difficult, and Jim will explain a little bit more as to why. Back to you, Jim.
Thanks, Greg. So Greg and I, we put together this next slide here and on what is benchmarking. And we just wanted to talk a little bit about, there's a lot of different types of benchmarking. There's 5 major different types. There's general best practice, process benchmarking, strategic, performance, competitive, and industry. And all those are important. And one of the most important ones, of course, is a competitive benchmark. And so as the definition shows here, benchmarking is a process where you measure your company's success against competitors. Of course, that's a competitive benchmark to discover how you improve. So what's really unique about what we are providing here is a competitive benchmark to your processes. And so the electronics use case that we used last webinar, we saw that they were leaders in the 4 quartiles that we showed. They have the leaders, the followers, average, and laggards, each set up by these quartiles. And the question is, where are you and what would you want to be doing? So what we see from a MBA 401 class perspective and what we would teach there is that companies in the first quartile are generally buying. That means they're buying others. And this goes back to Greg's comment on M&A. So they're buying other companies. Companies in the second quartile tend to be selling their products and services, really focused on their stuff, and they might be selling here and there, but they're really focused on their products. Quartile 3 being bought, well, that's probably that. If you're in quartile 3 in your industry, you're probably looking at somebody purchasing you, and you being absorbed or combining with another company. If you're in the 4th quartile, we hope that none of you are, you probably are maybe going out of business. So you know, the real question is where are you positioned in your industry, and are you happy about it, and what are you doing about it? And that leads us to that first polling question that we have on how comfortable are you in understanding how supply chain is performing relative to your competitors. Are you comfortable, very comfortable, not so comfortable, uncomfortable, or none of these? So let's look at the results that we received. And again, please do respond, and we look forward to those responses here. So with that, it looks like, wow, we have the majority and not so comfortable and some uncomfortable. Greg, what have you been seeing lately in your travels?
It actually, it bodes quite well for what we have seen, folks, over the last couple of years now, especially because of the pandemic, in terms of the VUCA world, you know, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Again, no sector has been immune, and every sector is attempting to survive and thrive, folks. So I'm not surprised that many of you are not so comfortable with your supply chain processes and their maturity and effectiveness. So thank you very much for responding. Yeah, okay, there we go.
There we go. We got just a response in. Yeah, and I'm out in the field working with clients, and what I see is much of what you said, Greg. They're feeling the squeeze, and I think the biggest thing is yesterday's priorities are not today's priorities. You might be running a business the same way for the last 20 years, and all of a sudden now your priorities in managing your supply chain have changed. And the question is your internal decision making the same as it was 20 years ago? And is that working for you? And managing through that change, because simply put, your priorities are quite different today than they were in the past. So, and that's why we felt like this tool can certainly help you in assessing where you're at from a maturity perspective, and we can help manage you to help you reprioritize those efforts. Greg, any final thoughts before we move on?
No, I think we thank you very much. Good profile. Again, there's no right or wrong answer, but we wanted to get a temperature check from the audience. Thanks.
Thank you. So again, this is the 4th tier. Our tiers 1 through 3. We encourage you to try our best-in-class benchmark assessment. Single user, you can go online and fill that out for your company. Tier 2 is bringing that all together with a group of your colleagues, your executive colleagues, to assess your performance and get some pretty piffy results. And Then we break it out into your decision-making brackets of strategic, tactical, and operational levels, as we just mentioned. Tier 3 is that benchmark relative to your industry that we've talked about, and getting you set up to say, are you a leader, follower, average, that we just discussed. And then tier 4 that we'll talk about more today is the playbook and how that playbook is put together. We customize it for you. We provide you those 10 questions to ask your organization. Again, these are dependent on where you are and who you are. And then the supply chain management roadmap on how to get ready for supply chain risk and resiliency, and your improvement action plan and what to do and how to do it. And again, you see the coaching hours associated. We'll get into that more. With that, Greg?
You bet. Thanks, Jim. I want to talk a little bit about this is a new section, Tier 4, the Supply Chain Improvement Acceleration Playbook. So let's take a look. We will develop a tailored supply chain management improvement acceleration playbook for your business. That's what Tier 4 looks like. What is our goal? Provide a set of proven best practices for you to identify, maybe assess, mitigate, and actually manage your supply chain process proactively to ensure and improve maturity. All right. What's the description of our playbook? It'll contain terms, definitions, descriptions, diagrams, scenarios, all for your supply chain management team. Some of the sections in the playbook will look like a tailored assessment for your current business maturity, and we're going to talk in detail today about that maturity. Customize improvements aligned to your business and its scenarios, and a cadence as to moving forward. Set of tactics that we will share with you, engage your SCM team to perform at a higher level. And then finally, a set of strategies for your executive team to lead, guide, direct, and coach your team to improve and go forward and get some bottom line benefits. So we'll talk more about that in a minute. So again, Tier 4 is utilizing all the elements of the previous 3 tiers that you walk through, and essentially you receive a playbook from us with a host of coaching and consulting hours. So with that, Jim will profile some major elements of an enterprise, kind of give you a thumbnail sketch of how we view your enterprise and your supply chain processes. Jim.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, so we'll look at those major elements of an enterprise, and we're going to go back a ways back to Michael Porter in the 1980s. It's still true to today. These are the elements of an enterprise. And you have some value chain activities that go across all the enterprise, and they're, your firm infrastructure, HR, sometimes called talent management today, of course, technology development, whether that's software as a service, all the way to hard products of making cell phones. Procurement, of course, is across all of the enterprise. And then you have your silos of inbound operations, outbound logistics, marketing, sales, and services. And these are those primary activities, and those are more the heartbeat of your company. So you can look at the value chain activities as your back office, we used to call it, and the primary activities as the day-to-day heartbeat of the company. And of course, from a supply chain perspective, we're trying to cut out cost. And from a business perspective, we're trying to drive business margin. So, looking at these end-to-end supply chains, the goal is to move from department to enterprise in these value chain activities. So understanding your value chains end-to-end is key in creating that value that exceeds the cost of conducting that activity, and to generate a sustained profit to the bottom line of the company. Now, there's even going back just about 10 or 20 years later, Gartner came up with this mindset of, well, how do you become a resilient company? And one of those first attempts was the 5-stage maturity model when it moved from a 4-stage to a 5-stage back in the early 2000s. And what we looked at and how they laid it out, I thought was very genius. On the left-hand side, we have the mindset of the company. Are you inside out or are you outside in? And then from a target perspective, are you focused on service or cost? So generally, most companies, as they're more lower in maturity, stage 1 through 3, they're focused on just trying to get the stuff out. And stage 1 is the business units you see are independently running. They're not working with each other. The revenue, they're all focused on revenue. They might be competing against each other. They're not adaptable. They're trying to be adaptable, but within each one of their business units, and that becomes very, very expensive. Then they say, okay, well, let's get all the business units together. We move to level 2 and we start building structure. And that's very good. But again, you start running out of gas, so to speak. And the outcome is standardized once it size fits all. And so you start gaining inefficiencies by trying to centralize. So sometimes, when you centralize, you try to gain efficiencies, but then you lose other things, especially you lose customers, and you're in that inside out kind of mindset. And this is not, adaptable either. And it's, maybe a little bit scalable, but you're not really there. Then you get to stage 3, where you're saying, okay, we need to really find a balance between demand, supply, and your products and your integrated supply chain. You get an outcome that is focused on profit. Now, we always talk about going 1, 2, 3, and most companies will go 1, 2, 3. They'll get a new CEO, and then they'll do 1, 2, 3. We call it the 1, 2, 3 step, and they really never make it past 3. They get on the fringes of 3, but never make it over that hump where you're actually where value equals profit. And so what we would espouse is that, working towards stage 4 and 5, there is a return on investment of getting to stage 4 and 5, but it's sometimes very hard to see if you're in that bottom tier. So we found that this model really does work very well in the supply chain world. And with that, I want to get into our supply chain framework. So we've composed it in 3 major areas. One is a balanced set of measures using the balanced scorecard that's been around. And this is more at the strategic level, pretty well known, been out there for 25 years or so by Kaplan, pretty well established. But what we want to do is, from a KPI development framework, is look at linking this from strategic, tactical, and operational levels from a supply chain perspective, identifying the areas of risk in planning, supply, demand, and operations, in the type of risks at strategic, tactical, and operational levels, because those are your decision makers, and linking those into cascading metrics is key. Some of the KPIs that you may or may not have heard or may be using are everything from product order fulfillment, OTIF, on time and full performance, lots of acronyms here, DSO, day sales outstanding, inventory, cash to cash cycle time, gross margin return on investment. So those KPIs, you can have hundreds of KPIs for any given business. The question is, what are the 3 to 5 KPIs you should be focusing on now to drive your growth? It will change over time, and as you mature, it will change. And so we've developed this executive return on investment roadmap on 7 steps here. Is how mature are your supply chain processes? What are your strengths and weaknesses? How do you measure up within your industry? And what's important to us as a company, and how does it link to your bottom line? And what action plan is necessary to improve your position, and what are the benefits derived to your business? So that gives you a little bit of outline of setting up a nice KPI dashboard to drive this decision making. With that, Greg?
You bet. Thanks a lot. We said we would talk about the SCM readiness tiers 1 through 3, And so in this section, we'll just give you a very brief thumbnail sketch of the 3-tier deliverables before we talk a little bit more about the details in the playbook. So with that, we'll go to tier 1. Again, from a recap point of view, tier 1, supply chain management readiness assessment. On the left-hand side is our graph. Remember, this tier is free. You can go into the website and play with it to heart's content. What does it look like? Well, there are 13 tenants. You can see them on the left-hand side in the chart. That's our point of view about what makes up an end-to-end supply chain over our 40 years worth of experience. The star chart is a maturity model, folks, depicting how mature a company's supply chain processes are, where the lower the number in the chart, the more mature that process. As you go through their 92 questions of discovery, you can see a company's response, your company's response. That's the black line in the chart. Remember, the farther away the responses are from the center of the graph, the less mature the supply chain process. And secondarily in the chart, we've developed risk level within the maturity model. And again, the farther away you are from the center, the higher the inherent risk you have per individual supply chain process. So on the right-hand side, what do we provide? There's insights, there's good insights. What does this mean in terms of our supply chain maturity? You get a visual on how mature your supply chain processes are. What does this imply about our risk profile? You get a sense of your inherent risk. And then what should we do next? That is resident in the maturity model. So the deliverables establish an objective as is supply chain position end to end, provides direction in terms of a 2B. There are some recommendations inside the model. It identifies an initial risk assessment level, so you have a baseline, and it acts as a benchmarking vehicle to evaluate future supply chain improvements. So we have additional recaps on tier 2. Tier 2 is essentially 5K. It's not free. You do tier 1 and you move to tier 2. On the left-hand side, you see a different graph, same but different. There's different profiles there. We've categorized the 13 tenets that we just talked about, or processes, into strategic, tactical, and operational. The blue are strategic, the red are tactical, and the green are operational. So what you see is the black line represents an organization's actual survey responses, and then we profile their strategic, tactical, and operational strengths on top of their as-is condition. So the kind of insights you get from this tier is where are we relative to best in class? Best in class, you can see, is the orange. We didn't really talk about that. The orange circle is best in class. That's where best in class organizations tend to hover around. Where are your strengths and weaknesses? What's it mean in terms of supply chain maturity? Where do we focus the improvement? And how do we go about improving, the how to, not only the what, but the how. And then the deliverables are, again, it acts as a benchmarking vehicle, gives you an as-is situation, both your existing maturity and your strengths and weaknesses. It provides direction for your future strength to strengthen those strategic, tactical, and operational areas. Provide, again, initial risk assessment level for your processes, and then provides observations and even performance gaps so you can start to take a look at how to improve. So with that, tier 2, again, is a little different. We said it basically is 5K to join. And essentially, we take a little different approach to tier 2. Not like tier 1. Tier 1 is for one person. We want to make sure you're aware of that. One person or one team to give one set of answers. Tier 2 is more of a survey approach, and it's a much broader approach to the company's focus. And so our goal in tier 2 is to gain a single supply chain management language aligned with your goals. All right. We would advocate, if you do tier 2, that your team essentially is focused on a product line. Pick a small product line, and then essentially something you can manage, something you can get your hands around. And then we would advocate that you have at least 5 to 8 executives across the disciplines that you see on the bottom. Those are the types of disciplines we would recommend that get involved in tier 2 and answer the questions. So with that, we gave you a little thumbnail sketch on tier 1, tier 2. They are a little different. And then Jim will talk a little bit more about the other tiers. Jim.
Thanks, Greg. So we get into tier 3, and this is the bridge slide from tier 2 to tier 3. You have the different levels, the Ring of Fire, Apprentice, Mainstream, and Exemplar on the left side that Greg just covered in tier 2. And now we're getting into tier 3, where the benchmark performance is. And that's how you are relative to your industry. And again, you're broken into leaders, followers, average, and laggards for that. So it's very interesting because, you know, depending on your industry, you could be a leader, like what we showed the electronics case study of our last webinar, where they're leaders in the industry at how they're performing, whether that's 5.7 or 2.2, that, you know, you're a leader in that industry. You could be a laggard in that industry, or you could just be average. So it's not a right or wrong here, folks. As Greg has said many times, it's a question of where you are at. And again, everything is broken up in this industry benchmarking into the quartiles that we covered last time. The laggards are the minimal 0 to percentile 25. So that's the first quarter of the pie, let's say. The average is the P25 to P50. That's the second half. So that's the up to the middle or median of the data. And then the followers are the median to the percentile 20 or 75. So that P50 to P75 are the followers. And then the leaders, of course, are in that top tier, the P75 to P100 maximum score, and the highest score. And again, the question is how does performance compare with others within your industry? So this is a very powerful level to be able to provide. And this is the first deliverable out of the tier 3 deliverable. So again, the tier 2 is now looking at, now that you understand where you're at, now we can start putting together a plan. So we built in the questionnaire that you would ask your team is, what is the relative importance of each of the tenants to the other tenants? And we have you rank those from 1 to 10, and then that turns into an importance maturity. Then we ask, how satisfied are you in each of those tenants? And we rank that as importance times 10 minus satisfaction. And that gives you the priority areas of where you should focus. So very quickly, this generally takes up to 3 to 4 months if you're going to do it manually. Here, we're containing it all within this tier 2 our tier 3 deliverable, our second deliverable for tier 3. It's all up in a nutshell for you so you can get going and take action, so you can get some insights right away. So again, some of the clear insights for this 12K offering is, where are you relative to best in class, tier 2? Where are you relative to your industry? And what does this mean in terms of supply chain maturity? And how do you prioritize your improvement efforts? I think one of the biggest problems is, and challenges that, excuse me, many companies have is, how do you prioritize your improvement efforts? Once you understand where you're at, now what do you do? In what order do you do it? And that's what you will get from us, those insights. So the deliverables are, we establish your objectives as is supply chain position relative to your competition. And then they acts as a best in class of an industry benchmarking, excuse me, vehicle to evaluate future supply chain improvements and provides direction for your future to strengthen your supply chain aligned to the market. And then we provide observations of performance gaps and high risk areas relative to your industry along the 13 tenets. And again, we're going to focus on 2 or 3 areas at the most, so we keep you focused. And then it's very sequential, so you work at the right pace, the right time, the right place. And we provide that initial risk assessment level set to action plan aligned to your industry. So the biggest challenge, I think, in organizations is not coming up with improvement ideas, but organizing them in a clear and methodical way. And that's what we provide here on this online tool in a very quick assessment. So again, as a recap, tiers 1 through 2 are giving you that best-in-class segmentation. Tier 2 gives you this strategic, tactical, and operational focus. Tier 3 gives you the industry benchmark. And tier 3, the second, it tells you your direction. So it's everything from your individual to your team to your across your organization and how to drive improvements. And so the real question is, what does it mean for your performance and what should your supply chain priorities be? That's what we're wrapping up for it. So the insights now for tier 4, the improvement acceleration playbook, include those tier 1 through 3 findings and feedback on what resonated within your organization, those healthy cross-functional discussions, a detailed assessment of how your organization is progressing, and the best practices employing supply chain improvements aligned with your organization's appetite. And that's why we call this the Readiness Playbook, is what is your readiness and your appetite for your vision? And of course, we provide sufficient coaching, 32 hours that's customized to your requirements. We provide you that supply chain acceleration playbook, that walkthrough plan, the prioritizations rankings relative to the benchmarks. And this is key, the top 10 questions to ask your organization to confirm their readiness for improvement. How are we going to navigate this over the next, let's say, 3 months to 18 months? And we will provide that on-site virtual stakeholder interviews, education workshops, and coaching. We'll provide that roadmap for you, and the supply chain improvement action plan of what and how. So that's what we provide in the improvement acceleration playbook. Pretty exciting. Again, it's a little bit more expensive at $25K, but this is completely customized to your company, your business, and where you focus. With that, we're going to move on to leveraging the outputs from all of our tiers in this section. And we'll kick it off with tier 1 recap. Again, the output: assess how mature or immature your processes are, investigate immature processes, and reinforce mature processes. So for practical call to actions, we want to address your surprises. We want to get you out of daily surprises. And we want to address those in the tier 1, identify those. And then the value proposition is develop an action plan to address that immature processes and get your supply chain stakeholders aligned. And what does good look like? Well, improvements are being made and notable increased maturity over time. So that's something you can take away from tier 1 yourself. Or again, as we offer for a very little bit amount of money, $5K, we can help you guide guide you through that in creating that aligned vision relative to best in class. So your outputs are the business unit perspective, not your perspective, personal perspective, and the profile of your supply chain processes, strengths and weaknesses at the strategic, tactical, and operational levels. And the value proposition here is to validate the supply chain process maturity and the strategic, tactical, and operational profile, and the discussions about alignment across your stakeholders. And what does good look like here? Your business units has consensus. You're in agreement in the terms of the strengths and weaknesses and best in class STO maturity. So are you aligned? Do you know how you're aligned? So for 5K, in a little bit of formal coaching at 8 hours, it provides you quite a bit of value. And for 12K, you're getting that industry benchmark. And again, the outputs here are more about how you fit within your industry and understanding your industry relative to best in class maturity. The practical call to action here is key. Align mission relative to your industry. And then your value proposition here is how are you positioned within your industry, your maturity, and discussion about alignment across the supply chain stakeholders and providing that plan. So what does good look like here? If you're happy with the position, how does it help you maintain that position? And if you're not happy with the position, how can we assist you to improve your position and where you're at? And so again, this is how you compare with your competition. And that's for the first deliverable. For the second deliverable, it's all about the practical call to action is aligning the action plan relative to your business priorities. The outputs here, business unit perspective on what's important in your supply chain. The second output is business unit perspectives on how satisfied you are, and then a ranking of both importance and satisfaction. And then you're going to validate that through your value proposition and in the rankings. And then you're going to have a discussion about alignment across with all your supply chain stakeholders. And what does good look like here? If you believe the ranking, you will develop an action plan to drive improvements. If you don't believe it, we will assist you to improve. Again, here you get 16 hours of coaching. And then our fourth tier again is that tailored supply chain improvement acceleration playbook. That's your practical call to action with a tailored supply chain improvement acceleration playbook to match your business mission. 3 different types of perspective in terms of supply chain management, a practitioner, academician, and big consulting. So we have all that to provide. And then the value prop here is improvements that follow a concerted roadmap that is prioritized to maximize maturity in the shortest amount of time. So we want to get you in the right place at the right time in the shortest amount of times. That is the right time, right way, in the right order. Very, very key. So what does good look like here? We improve on your weak processes, sustain your strong processes, improve your bottom line, garnering your new market share, and improving your position in the industry. And again, here you're getting quite a bit of coaching and consulting, 32. It's customized to what your needs are and what your expectations are. With that, Greg?
You bet. Thanks a lot, Jim. Hopefully you can witness that there is a lot of value add within all the tiers. We just want to finish with talking about why are we doing this? To basically accelerate time to value and your bottom line. So this is what we see from exemplars in supply chain performance over the years. This is kind of the so what. This is where this is the value add we're attempting to move you to. Some of the elements are revenue enhancement, sure. Increasing ability to retain your customers with a resulting 3 to 7% increase in sales. That's just with your existing customers. Other exemplars do this. They improve their delivery up to 99%. They're bringing stockouts down to 0 to 5%. They're reducing cycle times on a regular basis, anywhere from 10 to 20%. They're increasing market share, as we said, based on where you are positioned within your industry. And they're improving their speed to market. That's just revenue enhancement. What else are they doing? Profitability. Exemplars run with a 7% cost advantage over average performers in their industry. They're reducing their markdowns if they're in retail and scrap if they're in manufacturing, anywhere from 40 to 50%. Another element is capital utilization. Exemplars are operating with 40 to 65% advantage in cash cycle time. And cash cycle time is inventory days of supply plus receivables minus payables. If you're not calculating that, that is a key performance indicator and also a risk mitigation indicator. You should take a look at that. They're also utilizing their resources 10 to 20% more efficiently than the average company. And then finally, cost of capital. The exemplars are running with 40 to 80% less inventory than their competitors. And you're right. I know what you're thinking. Well, lean, we've leaned out a lot of inventory buffers, and with shortages, yes, that is a risk event. All right. But they're also reducing their inventory levels on a regular basis, historically, anywhere from 10 to 50%. So those to us are some pretty compelling benefits to be derived, especially in times of stress, which we're operating right now. And to finish up, again, Tier 4 is a supply chain management readiness assessment. It's your playbook. It will be tailored for you. Contact us if you have any questions regarding any of the tiers, all right? Let us know how you feel about the process, especially if you go into Tier 1, which is free. It's one type of answer, but you can get an initial chart to see how your organization is relative to best in class. Talk to us if you have any questions on anything. Think about what product line you might want to analyze in your organization. And if you're a consultant, you could run through and exercise an existing client or a former client. And tell us how we can assist you going forward. We've given you the webinar or the website, my address and Jim's address. So with that, we'll turn it back to Jim.
Again, everyone, thank you for joining us and sticking with us. We will be having our 5th webinar coming in mid-September on the 22nd, our capstone webinar on launching supply chain readiness tools to survive and thrive in the VUCA world. We look forward to seeing you there, as well as we'll be kicking off our supply chain risk and resiliency in mid-September also, the previous webinar. So we do appreciate you joining and participating in the webinar. We thank you for your feedback, your questions, your comments, and participation in the polling. And we look forward to seeing you in future webinars. And we want to thank Connor for helping us set up the webinar. And with that, Greg, do you have any closing comments?
Yeah, one question out there from a participant is, are the slides to be made available to attendees?
Yes, of course. As all our webinars, they are always available to all attendees. We will send out the slides. If you would like to see any of the previous webinars, feel free to contact us. They are posted, and we'll send you that link. And you can also find most of this information on the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium's website. So visit there, but always feel free to contact us directly.
You bet. Yep, I want to thank everyone for attending. We shared with you our comprehensive levels of the supply chain management readiness assessment approach. We hope you can see the accretive nature of the methodology in terms of improving your supply chain processes. And again, why are we doing this? Why are we building this? To give your supply chain a booster shot in times of crisis. We're trying to accelerate your time to value, and we're certainly attempting to help you survive and thrive in this VUCA world. So we just wanted to close with that approach in terms of why are we putting together this multi-tier approach. So with that, thank you again and enjoy.